Today we're going to deconstruct your comparative essay task for 12 Angry Men and look at what the original intent was for the play, your thesis writing, and then we're going to look at your body paragraphs and introduction and conclusion and deconstruct an exemplar for you. So just to recap, the focus question of your task is, does the film interpretation of 12 Angry Men uphold Rose's original intent? And of course, when we say Rose, we're referring to Reginald Rose, who was the writer of the play. So remember, uphold, you can use a range of words to meet that still means uphold. So you could say supports or sustains, maintains, etc. So you don't always have to say the same word throughout. You should be using a range of vocabulary. We touched in class on what the original intent was, and in order to prove that, you will look through plot, character, setting, and theme, and you'll pick two of them. Okay, so we copied this down. The original intent was the need for justice and the danger that prejudice can have. And what that means, broken down a bit more in depth, is that prejudice can obscure the truth and can cause good people to suffer unnecessarily. It also touches on how people should be treated fairly, no matter their background or colour, race, etc. And in reference to Juror 8, it takes courage to stand up and fight against other prejudices that people have that could prevent that fair and equal treatment. So every element that you look at, whether it's plot, character, setting, or theme, needs to have examples that support this intent. Okay, so if you pick a character, you should be picking and analysing characters that link to this original intent or that show this intent. You know, about maybe it's prejudice obscures the truth. You might analyse someone like Juror 10, who has a fair amount of prejudices, and you could prove that point. You might look at Juror 8, who has the courage to stand up and fight against everyone else's prejudices. Okay, so you could analyse his personality and how he helps to get that intent across. You might look at themes, you know, and look at justice and the need for justice. You might link that to prejudice. Okay, so in the same with plot, you could just talk about the plot line and how this whole message is embedded throughout the events of the play. So no matter what you analyse, everything, it's not just a comparison of the film and the play. It's how the film upheld the original intent, and the intent is this. Okay, so this all still was evident in the film, and you've got to analyse how. Okay. So we looked at how to write a thesis. It had your opinion about a particular topic. Okay, we wrote them in class. They were a single sentence, and then we needed the evidence to support that. So just touching on our thesis rules, remember it's not a question. You should only be mentioning things you're going to discuss in your essay, and should only have one specific idea and not be so broad. Okay, so there's your formula for your thesis. The topic plus opinion is your thesis statement. The opinion comes through the use of those adjectives to help give across your positive or negative opinion. Okay, so it has to respond to the question on your task sheet about upholding the original intent, and then we're going to link in your preview of arguments about which two chosen elements you're going to discuss. Okay, we've agreed to go with the agreeing option. Okay, because the movie does hold the intent, so you need to argue that. This is an example of an ineffective thesis because it doesn't have those opinionated comments, and it doesn't actually tell us what the topic of our essay is going to be. It doesn't mention anything about the original intent. So the next slide here shows us an effective thesis. Okay, down here it's color-coded for you. We've got our topic in green, responding to the question here. So the film adaptation is the topic and how it upholds. That should be Roses. Okay, intent, and then we've got our elements that we are going to analyse as our preview of arguments, and then the opinion part comes through the red. So words like effectively or skillfully or successfully. Okay, so this is an example Friedkin's film adaptation of 12 Angry Men effectively upholds Rose's original intent while making it accessible for a modern audience through his skillful portrayal of the plot and characters. Now, you can reorder that, so you might start with the elements, so through the skillful portrayal of plot and characters, Friedkin's film, da-da-da-da-da. You might use other adjectives or adverbs other than skillfully or effectively. You might choose successfully or adequately or adeptly, anything that shows your opinion. Okay, and we can also reword film interpretation. We can say adaptation or film version. There's many ways you can make your thesis your own and unique. Okay, so here's that list of stuff we talked through in class, the different adjectives you could use or adverbs, okay, other words instead of saying uphold, and other words for film interpretation. So use a range of these to make your thesis your own. Okay, the next step, you needed to choose which two elements you were going to analyze in your essay, whether you were going to do plot and character, plot and theme, character or setting, whichever two combinations you're going to use. Just remember that you need to have quotes from the play in order to support how it held up the original intent. Okay, so you've got to find a quote that supports the argument that you're making. You need to make sure you choose a quote with substance that actually links to the element that you are discussing. Evidence from the film, because it fairly much stays true to the play, you're going to be looking at how the film helps to emphasize the intent. So the use of camera angles or facial expressions, gestures, they might be delivering the same line, but his facial expressions or the reactions of close-ups of the other characters maybe emphasizes the prejudice that's shown or something along those lines. Okay, so look beyond just the lines that are spoken and the fact that it's kept the same. Talk about how the film helps to emphasize and maintain that. Okay, so there's some focus areas for you just to give you a little bit of guidance. Character, we said it might be good to look at, their personality and their decisions and actions. Okay, plot is just the events. Okay, so maybe you could be talking about the order in which the jurors changed their votes, or that juror 8 has to convince them and how that stayed the same. Setting, you might talk about how it has been modernized for a more modern audience, but the fact that he's added other races kind of emphasizes the point about prejudice, okay, rather than it just being set in a all-white jury. Okay, themes, again, they would be the same. You just talk about how he's helped to emphasize them. Okay, so then your introduction here. This is the stuff we've been going through in class. It's color-coded for you up here. This is what's on your task sheet for your scaffold, and this is your example. So when you introduce the topic, you talk about the play, and you could also talk about how plays have been adapted into films over time, and you can introduce the modern adaptation that we're going to talk about. So my description sentence says, many plays throughout history have made their way from the stage to the big screen in order to appeal to a wider audience, including Reginald Rose's play 12 Angry Men, written in 1954. One such adaptation is William Friedkin's 1997 film version of the same name. So then I go on to give an overview of what 12 Angry Men is about. Because I've mentioned the film already, I don't say the play or the movie, I just mention the title. So 12 Angry Men tells the story of 12 jurors, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But what I also include in this overview section is the intent, because that's the focus of our essay. So that goes back to this slide that we were talking about earlier. So this is what you should summarize and talk about what intent he has had in writing the play. Okay, that way when you're analysing throughout, we know what the intent is. So once you've done that, you give your thesis and preview of arguments, because our preview of arguments was put in our thesis. So Friedkin skillfully and effectively uses the elements of, and you insert your elements, in his 1997 film interpretation of 12 Angry Men to successfully, make sure you're adding those adjectives and adverbs in, uphold Rose's original intent whilst appealing to a modern audience. This section here is optional. You don't necessarily have to argue the modern audience aspect. That's only if you choose to. Okay, moving on to your body paragraphs. So remember, you choose what you're focusing on. So your topic sentence needs to link to your thesis about upholding the intent or not, and be specific. So this one says Friedkin has successfully communicated Rose's original intent that prejudice obscures the truth. So we were specific. We didn't just say the intent. All right. Then he mentions the element. He's done this by staying true to the plot. The next bit is you then expand on that element. Okay, so this is about the plot, so we go on and discuss the plot here. If it was characters, you would start discussing maybe which character and what their personality is like. Okay, so in his play, Rose communicates this intent by having juror A vote not guilty. So that's an event. Okay, that's why it's plot. While all the other jurors vote guilty, etc., etc. Okay, we've given what we're going to discuss about. Now we need the evidence, and that's the green section. Okay, when you find quotes, you need to have the page numbers, okay, from the play, and you need to make sure you reference it. Quotes also have quotation marks. Okay, in Act 1 of the play, the audience is shown just how much courage, so remember it's linked to that intent, is required to fight against the prejudice when Juror 9 states. Remember, your quotes need to be introduced properly within a sentence, not just be a standalone sentence. Okay? Once we've then given the quote, you've got to then link it to the film and the intent. How was that intent still shown and emphasized and maintained in the film? So comparative words, so reiterated, okay, or is maintained in the film, and then we go on to give the example from the film about how it was emphasized. Okay, camera angles used to emphasize the body language, and then we deliver the same line, so there's your evidence, but then we're talking about how it's helped to emphasize it and what it shows, linking it back and analyzing how it shows this intent of prejudice obscuring the truth. So once you've done your in-depth analysis, you link back to your thesis or your topic sentence, which is about the plot in the original intent, and you sum it up. Okay, has he effectively done it? Yes, he has. Okay, then we link to the next paragraph, and of course in your second body paragraph you won't link to your conclusion. You will just sum up and link back to your thesis. Then finally your conclusion is pretty straightforward. You restate the thesis, so use those summary words. Evidently it is clear to see that da-da-da-da-da, and I've reworded it from how it was said in my introduction, and then I restate my two arguments and summarize it. I would avoid just saying he did this through the use of plot and character. Actually tell me what your arguments were. By maintaining the same plot events as the play and having Juror 8 maintain his initial not guilty vote, Friedkin effectively maintained the intent da-da-da-da-da. Then I've gone on to characters. Additionally, so those nice linking words, the characters' personalities were maintained, still revealing the prejudices each juror held da-da-da, and linking that to that intent statement again. Alright, and then because my thesis said about a modern audience, my characters paragraph would discuss some of those changes about appealing to that modern audience. Okay, but I've mentioned that it only enhanced the intent, but didn't change it. Alright, then overall, your final statement should link back to about how text can be adapted again, like I did in the intro. So without Friedkin's transformation from play to film, audience may not have been exposed to the insightful lessons learned about prejudice obscuring the truth in the original play. The adaptation of text to any other type of medium is very beneficial to society, as the messages embedded within these texts can make their way to a wider audience in order to educate the world. So that's just more general than to sum it up and finish it off. Now remember, these examples have been done for you to guide you only. You need to make yours your own work. Use it as guidance. Do not copy it. Okay, do not just change a few words. You have to go through and plan your own arguments and your own evidence, okay, and your own thesis, your own ending sentences, all right, and make sure your work is individual and unique.